Hi, I'm Vanessa Hart. 3 months ago, my father looked me straight in the eye across his mahogany desk and told me I'd never understand business. Not the way Brandon does, he said. Not the way a real Hart does. I didn't argue. I didn't beg for another chance. I just walked out of Hart Industrial Supply with my box of personal items and the weight of 30 years of being second best pressing down on my shoulders. But this morning, I woke up to 9 missed calls from him. 9. Because yesterday, I closed the deal that made me the new owner of Blackwell Distribution, his biggest competitor. And in this industry, in this city, that means I just became the one thing he never thought I could be. His equal. Or maybe, if I play this right, something more. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in the Hart Industrial Supply main office always hummed at a frequency that made my teeth ache. I'd worked there for 6 years, ever since I graduated with my business degree from University of Colorado. 6 years of showing up early, staying late, memorizing product codes, learning the supply chain inside and out, building relationships with vendors my father had alienated with his stubborn refusal to adapt. 6 years of being invisible. The day it ended started like any other Wednesday. I'd arrived at 7 in the morning, a full hour before anyone else, to prepare the quarterly report I'd been working on for weeks. The numbers were solid. Our delivery times were down by 18% since I'd restructured the routing system. Customer complaints had dropped by 42% after I implemented the new tracking software. We'd retained 3 major accounts that were on the verge of walking because I'd personally visited their sites and listened to what they actually needed instead of pushing whatever we had in overstock. I printed the report on heavy cream paper, the expensive kind my father preferred for important documents. I bound it in a navy cover with the Hart Industrial logo embossed in gold. I even included a contents page and tabs for easy reference. Looking back, I don't know why I bothered with those details. Maybe some part of me still believed that if I just presented things the right way, made them look professional enough, official enough, he'd finally see what I was capable of. Brandon strolled in around 8:30, coffee from the expensive place downtown in his hand, aviator sunglasses pushed up into his hair even though it was October and the sun barely crested the mountains until 9. He nodded at me as he passed my desk in the corner by the supply closet. Not a greeting, exactly. More of an acknowledgement that I existed in his peripheral vision. He disappeared into the office he shared with our father, the one with the view of the Front Range, the one with the leather furniture and the bar cart and the framed photos of them at industry conferences, golf tournaments, Broncos games. I sat at my metal desk with the wobbly left leg and waited. The report sat in front of me, aligned perfectly parallel to the edge of my desk. My email was open to the message I'd sent the night before requesting a meeting to discuss operational improvements. My father had replied with a single word. Fine. At 9:15, his assistant Pauline, who'd worked for my father longer than I'd been alive, appeared beside my desk. She didn't make eye contact. "He'll see you now," she said, and there was something in her voice that sounded like pity, which should have been my first warning. I picked up the report and followed her down the hallway lined with photos of Hart Industrial's history. My grandfather shaking hands with the mayor in 1967. My father cutting the ribbon on the new warehouse in 1989. Brandon accepting the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce Emerging Leader Award 2 years ago for a presentation he'd given using research I'd compiled. I wasn't in any of the photos. The door to the office was already open. My father sat behind his desk, the one made from reclaimed barnwood that cost more than my first car. Brandon was perched on the arm of the leather sofa, scrolling through his phone. Neither of them looked up when I entered. I cleared my throat softly. I put together the quarterly analysis you asked for. I thought we could walk through some of the efficiency improvements and discuss implementing them company-wide. My father finally glanced up. His reading glasses were pushed down his nose, the way they always were when he was reviewing contracts. He looked at me the way you'd look at a telemarketer who'd interrupted dinner. He looked at me the way he'd looked at me my entire life, like I was a problem he couldn't quite solve and had grown tired of trying. "Vanessa," he said, and my name in his mouth always sounded like a sigh. I don't have time for this right now. I held out the report anyway. I think you'll want to see these numbers. We could cut costs by nearly 30% if we streamlined the vendor contracts and updated the inventory management system. I've already gotten preliminary quotes from 3 software companies, and the ROI would be within the first 18 months. Brandon snorted without looking up from his phone. Software solutions. That's your answer for everything. Because it works, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The routing optimization I implemented last quarter saved us $73,000. That's documented. I can show you the before and after metrics. My father removed his glasses and set them down with the careful precision of someone demonstrating patience they didn't feel. Vanessa, there's a difference between running reports and understanding business. You're good at the numbers. I'll give you that. You're organized. Detail-oriented. Those are valuable skills for someone in a support role. Something cold settled in my stomach. I'm the operations manager. On paper, he said. But let's be realistic. You don't have the instincts for this. Business at this level, it's about relationships. It's about reading people, knowing when to push, when to hold back. It's about presence. Authority. You can't learn that from a spreadsheet. Brandon finally looked up, smirking. No offense, Nessa, but Dad's right. This industry respects strength. You're too soft. Too worried about hurting feelings or being fair. That's not how you close deals. I felt my face flush hot. I've closed deals. The Morrison account, the Stapleton project, the entire Highlands Ranch development contract. Those were all me. Those were because of the Hart name, my father said. They bought from us because we have a reputation in this city. Because I've spent 40 years building relationships with the people who matter. You made some phone calls and filled out paperwork. That's not the same thing as bringing in business. I stood there holding my useless report, feeling something crack open inside my chest. The numbers don't lie, I said quietly. Everything I've implemented has improved efficiency and profitability. That's not subjective. That's measurable fact. My father leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers across his stomach. He exchanged a look with Brandon, something passing between them that I wasn't part of, had never been part of. Vanessa, I'm going to be direct with you because clearly I haven't been direct enough. You're not cut out for leadership in this company. You don't have what it takes. Brandon does. He understands this business in his bones. It's time you accepted your limitations and found a role that better suits your capabilities. The words landed like physical blows. What role would that be? Something administrative. Human resources, maybe. Or you could explore opportunities outside the company entirely. I hear the school district is hiring coordinators. That might be more your speed. Less pressure. More structure. Brandon was nodding along like this was all perfectly reasonable. You'd probably be happier, honestly. You always seem stressed here. Like you're trying to prove something. I looked at my father and saw no recognition in his eyes. No acknowledgement of the late nights I'd spent fixing his mistakes, smoothing over relationships he'd damaged with his bullheaded refusal to modernize, keeping this company competitive while he and Brandon took credit and collected bonuses. I saw nothing but dismissal. Nothing but certainty that I was exactly what he'd always believed me to be. Less than. The report slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. Neither of them moved to pick it up. I didn't either. I just stood there for a moment, looking at all those carefully compiled pages scattered across the expensive rug, all that work reduced to trash he'd have Pauline throw away after I left. When I spoke, my voice came out clearer than I expected. Steadier. I understand. Good, my father said, already turning back to his computer. I'm glad we could have this conversation. It's better to be honest about these things. I walked out of that office for the last time. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I went to my desk and opened the bottom drawer where I kept a canvas tote bag for grocery shopping. I put my coffee mug inside, the one I'd brought from home because the office only had styrofoam. I added the small succulent plant I'd been keeping alive for 2 years, the framed photo of Uncle Vincent from back when he and my father were still partners, the good stapler I'd bought with my own money because the company ones never worked properly. Pauline appeared beside my desk again. She didn't ask what I was doing. She just set a manila folder down in front of me. "Your employment file," she said quietly. "In case you need it." And then, even quieter, "He's wrong about you. For what it's worth." It was worth something, but not enough to change what needed to happen next. I walked out of Hart Industrial Supply at 9:47 on a Wednesday morning in October. The air outside was sharp and thin, the way it always is in Denver before winter really sets in. The mountains were visible in the distance, purple and white against the blue sky, indifferent to whatever small human dramas played out in their shadow. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My car was a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door from where Brandon had backed into it in the parking lot 3 years ago and never apologized. I put my tote bag in the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel with the engine off. My hands were shaking, finally. Now that no one could see them, they were shaking. I drove east, away from the industrial park, away from the mountains, toward the parts of Denver that tourists don't see. I ended up on Colfax Avenue, the longest commercial street in America, 6 blocks of pawn shops and dive bars and auto repair places that had been there since before I was born. I pulled into the parking lot of a place called Budget Inn and Suites, though there was nothing sweet about it. The sign was missing the B and the U. The paint was the color of old putty. A man was smoking on the second-floor balcony, watching me with the blank interest of someone with nothing better to do. I went inside. The lobby smelled like industrial cleaner and something else, something stale and human. The woman at the desk had purple hair and neck tattoos and didn't look up from her crossword puzzle when I approached. "How long?" she said. Not a question, just a fill in the blank. "I don't know," I said. That earned me a glance. "Daily or weekly rates?" "Daily's $79. Weekly's $450. I pulled out my wallet and counted what I had. $360 in cash from my last paycheck, the one I'd cashed because I had a bad feeling about how that quarterly review would go. "Weekly," I said. She took my money and handed me a key attached to a green plastic diamond. "Room 214. Ice machine's broken. Checkout's at 11, but if you're staying the week, it doesn't matter. Wi-Fi password is on the desk." I climbed the stairs to the second floor, passing the smoking man, who nodded at me like we were neighbors now, which I supposed we were. Room 214 was at the end of the walkway. The key stuck in the lock, but when I shouldered the door, it opened. The room was small and dim. One double bed with a comforter the color of rust. A TV bolted to the dresser. A desk with a lamp and a binder labeled guest information in faded marker. The bathroom was visible through an open door, tiny and tiled in beige. Everything was clean in the way cheap motels are clean, functional but impersonal, designed to be forgotten as soon as you leave. I set my tote bag on the desk and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was firmer than I expected. The walls were thin enough that I could hear a television playing in the next room, some talk show with canned laughter. Outside, traffic rushed past on Colfax, constant and indifferent. I pulled out my phone. No messages. No calls. Not from my father, not from Brandon, not from my mother, who'd probably heard by now, who'd probably nodded along with whatever version of events my father had told her. I scrolled through my contacts, looking at all those names of people I'd thought were friends, colleagues, connections. People I'd helped with projects, covered for during sick days, invited to birthday drinks that they sometimes showed up to. I didn't call any of them. Instead, I opened my email and looked at my bank account. $4,237 in checking. $18,000 in savings that I'd been slowly building since college, thinking maybe I'd use it for a down payment on a condo eventually, somewhere in Cap Hill or Wash Park, somewhere I could walk to coffee shops and feel like I had a life outside of trying to earn a man's respect who decided before I was born that I wasn't worth it. I looked at my student loan balance. $31,000 still owed. Car payment. Health insurance that would run out at the end of the month since it was through the company. Phone bill. The numbers arranged themselves in my head the way they always did, clear and unavoidable. I had maybe 4 months before I hit crisis level. Less if something unexpected happened. A car repair. A medical emergency. 4 months to figure out what came next. The lamplight in the room was the color of old photographs. I sat there as the afternoon faded outside the window, watching shadows creep across the parking lot. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just sat very still and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd lost and what I might, if I was careful and smart and lucky, have the chance to build instead. At some point, hunger pulled me out of the room. There was a taco place 2 blocks down, the kind with plastic chairs and handwritten menus. I ordered 3 tacos and a Jarritos and sat at a wobbly table by the window, watching people pass by on the sidewalk. Students from the community college. Workers in paint-stained clothes. A woman with 2 small children who looked as tired as I felt. The tacos were good, better than they had any right to be. The tortillas were handmade. The salsa had actual heat. I ate slowly, making it last, and thought about Uncle Vincent. He'd been my father's younger brother and original business partner. They'd started Hart Industrial together back in the early 90s, 2 brothers with nothing but ambition and a small business loan. Vincent was the one who understood operations, who could see 3 steps ahead in the supply chain, who treated vendors and customers like human beings instead of transactions. My father was the face, the salesman, the one who could charm his way into any room. They'd been a good team until they weren't. I was only 7 when Vincent left the company, but I remembered the shouting matches, the slammed doors, the way family dinners became tense negotiations. My father accused Vincent of being too soft, too willing to leave money on the table for the sake of relationships. Vincent accused my father of being short-sighted, of burning bridges for short-term gains. In the end, Vincent took his share of the buyout and left Denver entirely. He moved to Seattle, started a consulting business, sent me birthday cards with handwritten notes that my father never mentioned. The last card came 3 years ago, 2 weeks before Vincent died of a heart attack at 54. Inside, he'd written, "Vanessa, your father sees business as war. I always saw it as gardening. You plant good seeds, tend them carefully, and trust that growth takes time. Don't let him convince you that cruelty is the same thing as strength. You have better instincts than he ever did." I'd kept that card in my desk drawer at work. It was probably still there, mixed in with old post-it notes and dried-out pens. But I didn't need the physical object. I'd memorized those words years ago. Back in room 214, I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. The Wi-Fi was slow but functional. I pulled up a blank document and started writing. Not a resume, not yet. Just a list of everything I knew how to do, everything I'd learned in 6 years of being underestimated. Inventory management systems. Vendor negotiations. Route optimization. Customer service protocols. Supply chain analysis. Contract review. Team coordination. Crisis management. Software implementation. Data analysis. Process improvement. Relationship building. The list grew longer than I expected. When I finished, I sat back and looked at it. These weren't the skills of someone in a support role. These were the skills of someone who knew how to run a company, maybe even better than the man who dismissed me that morning. I opened a new tab and searched for Denver business news. The first article that came up was about Blackwell Distribution, Hart Industrial's primary competitor. The headline read, "Local industrial supplier Blackwell Distribution seeking buyer after founder's retirement." I read the article twice. Warren Blackwell, who'd started his company 5 years before my father and had been a thorn in Hart Industrial's side for decades, was retiring. No family to pass the business to. No clear succession plan. He was quietly shopping the company to interested buyers, looking for someone who could maintain his legacy of fair dealing and customer service. The asking price wasn't listed, but the article mentioned annual revenues of $12 million. For a company that size, in this industry, I estimated the purchase price would be somewhere between $3 and $5 million. Money I didn't have. Money I'd never have. But I bookmarked the article anyway. Outside, the traffic on Colfax never stopped. Inside, I sat at that cheap desk in that forgettable room and felt something shift inside me, something that might have been anger or determination or maybe just the first stirrings of a plan too reckless to examine too closely. My father had told me I'd never understand business. He'd said it with such certainty, such finality. He'd also spent 40 years making enemies and burning bridges and coasting on a reputation built by a brother he'd driven away. He'd gotten comfortable. Complacent. He'd stopped adapting because he didn't think he had to. That was his first mistake. His second was assuming I'd disappear quietly. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Iris Nguyen, a business attorney I'd met 2 years ago at a Chamber of Commerce mixer. We'd stayed in touch, met for coffee occasionally, talked shop about the industrial supply industry and Denver's business climate. She'd told me once that if I ever wanted to branch out on my own, she'd help me navigate the legal maze. I composed a text message. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? I have a business question that's probably crazy, but I need a professional opinion. Her response came back within 5 minutes. I'm free at 9. Does grounds in Cap Hill work? And Vanessa, crazy business questions are my favorite kind. I set my phone down and looked around the room. The rust-colored comforter. The bolted television. The thin walls and the cheap desk and the parking lot view. This wasn't where I'd imagined my life would be at 32. This wasn't the plan. But plans change. People underestimate you. You walk out with nothing but a tote bag and the knowledge that you're capable of more than they'll ever give you credit for. And sometimes, if you're smart and stubborn and willing to risk everything on a crazy idea that might just work, you find a way to build something they'll never see coming. I turned off the lamp and lay down on top of the covers, fully dressed. In the darkness, I could still hear the traffic, the television next door, the sound of my own breathing steady and even. Tomorrow I'd meet Iris and start asking questions about business acquisitions and financing options and what it would take to buy a company I couldn't afford. Tomorrow I'd start building a plan. But tonight, I just lay there in that cheap motel room and let myself imagine my father's face when he realized that the daughter he'd dismissed, the one he'd told would never understand business, had just become the owner of his biggest competitor. I imagined walking into industry meetings as an equal. I imagined vendors choosing to work with me instead of him. I imagined, for the first time in my life, not having to prove myself to a man who decided my worth before I'd even had a chance to demonstrate it. The imagining felt dangerous and exhilarating. It felt like the beginning of something I couldn't take back. I fell asleep with my phone charging on the nightstand and Uncle Vincent's words running through my head. You have better instincts than he ever did. In the morning, I'd find out if that was true. The alarm on my phone went off at 6:30. Dragging me out of a shallow sleep filled with fragmented dreams about spreadsheets and mountain roads. The room was gray in the early morning light, and for a disorienting moment I couldn't remember where I was. Then it came back in a rush. The meeting. The dismissal. The motel room on Colfax. I showered in the tiny bathroom where the water pressure was weak but at least the temperature stayed consistent. My clothes from yesterday were wrinkled, so I did my best to smooth them out, wishing I'd thought to grab more than just a single change of outfit when I'd packed my tote bag. Mental note, go back to the family house when no one was home and get the rest of my things. Another mental note, figure out if I even wanted the rest of my things, or if this was a chance to start completely fresh. The mirror was fogged from the shower steam. I wiped it clear with my hand and looked at myself. Same face I'd seen every morning for 32 years. Same dark eyes, same sharp jawline I'd inherited from my father's side of the family, same hair that never quite cooperated with any style I attempted. But something felt different. Maybe it was just lack of sleep. Maybe it was the fluorescent bathroom lighting. Or maybe it was the fact that for the first time in years, I wasn't looking at someone who was trying to make herself smaller to fit into a space that was never designed for her. I stopped at a gas station on the way to Cap Hill and bought a protein bar and a large black coffee that tasted like burnt water but had enough caffeine to make my hands steady. The morning traffic was building, commuters heading downtown, people starting their ordinary days with their ordinary problems. I wondered how many of them had walked out on family businesses. How many had spent the night in cheap motels planning revenge that might just be financial suicide dressed up as ambition. Grounds Coffee was the kind of place that had mismatched furniture and local art on the walls and baristas who knew the regulars by name. I arrived 10 minutes early and claimed a table near the back, away from the windows, somewhere we could talk without being overheard. I ordered another coffee I didn't need and opened my laptop, pretending to review notes while my leg bounced under the table. Iris walked in at exactly 9 o'clock. She was dressed in what I'd come to think of as her uniform, tailored blazer, slim pants, leather portfolio tucked under one arm. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she moved through the coffee shop with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told she didn't belong in a room. She spotted me, smiled, and made her way over after ordering something complicated at the counter. When she sat down, she set her portfolio on the table and leaned back in her chair, studying me with the kind of direct attention that made most people uncomfortable. I'd always appreciated that about her. She didn't do small talk unless you wanted it. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. I didn't, much. I've had a development. Professional or personal? Both, I said. I quit my job yesterday. Or got pushed out, depending on how you want to frame it. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Hart Industrial? I nodded. My father made it clear I wasn't leadership material. Suggested I'd be happier in an administrative role. Somewhere with less pressure. Iris took a sip of her drink, something with foam and cinnamon on top, and her expression didn't change, but I saw the flash of anger in her eyes. She'd heard enough stories over our coffee meetings to understand the dynamics at play. Your father's an idiot. That's generous. So what's the crazy business question? I pulled up the article about Blackwell Distribution on my laptop and turned it so she could see. Warren Blackwell is selling. He's looking for a buyer who can maintain his company's reputation. No family to pass it to, no succession plan. I want to buy it. Iris read the article, her face impassive. Then she looked up at me. With what capital? I don't have it, I admitted. I've got about $22,000 in liquid assets. But I know that business inside and out. I know their vendors, their client base, their pain points. I've been competing against them for 6 years. And I know exactly how to make them more profitable than they currently are. She sat back, tapping one manicured nail against her coffee cup. Let me guess. Your father's biggest competitor becomes his worst nightmare if someone competent takes it over. That would be a side benefit, I said. But honestly, Iris, I'm not just doing this to hurt him. Blackwell Distribution has good bones. Warren built something solid, but he's old school. He hasn't invested in technology, his delivery system is inefficient, and he's leaving money on the table because he doesn't know how to market to the next generation of buyers. I could turn that company into something that doesn't just compete with Hart Industrial. I could make it the industry standard. Iris studied me for a long moment. The coffee shop hummed around us, conversations blending into white noise, the espresso machine hissing and gurgling. Finally, she leaned forward. Okay. Let's talk reality. To acquire a company doing $12 million in annual revenue, you're looking at $3 to $5 million purchase price, depending on assets and liabilities. You'd need to secure financing, which means convincing a bank or private investors that you're worth the risk. That's hard enough when you have an established track record. It's nearly impossible when you're walking in with less than $30,000 and a recently terminated employment history. I know, I said. That's why I'm asking what would make it possible instead of impossible. She pulled a legal pad from her portfolio and uncapped a pen. First, you need a business plan. Not a casual pitch. A comprehensive analysis with market research, competitive analysis, financial projections, and a clear growth strategy. Second, you need to understand Blackwell's actual financials. Revenue is one thing. Profitability is another. For all you know, they're bleeding money. Third, you need to figure out your financing structure. Banks are going to want collateral you don't have and a credit history that shows you can manage debt. So you're probably looking at private investors or a small business acquisition loan with a personal guarantee, which means if this fails, you're personally liable for millions of dollars. The weight of it settled over me like a physical thing. When she laid it out like that, step by step, the impossibility of it became clear. But impossibility had never stopped me from doing the work before. It had just made the victory sweeter when I proved everyone wrong. What if I could get a meeting with Warren Blackwell? I asked. What if I could convince him that I'm the right person to carry on what he built? Then you'd have a shot, Iris said. Warren's reputation in this industry is built on integrity and relationships. If he believes you respect what he's created, he might be willing to work with you on terms. Seller financing is possible. He could carry a note for part of the purchase price, which would reduce what you need up front. But Vanessa, you need to understand something. This isn't just about buying a company. You're going to be competing directly with your father. He's going to see this as a personal attack. He's going to come after you with everything he has. Good, I said. Let him. She smiled then, sharp and approving. All right. Let's build you a business plan. We spent the next 4 hours at that coffee shop table, my laptop between us, Iris firing questions faster than I could answer them. What's your target market? How will you differentiate from Hart Industrial? What's your customer acquisition strategy? What are your projected operating costs? How will you finance inventory? What's your staffing plan? I answered everything. Some answers I had ready because I'd been thinking about this industry for 6 years. Others I had to research on the spot, pulling up data on my phone, scrolling through industry reports, checking comparable company valuations. Iris took notes in her precise handwriting, occasionally circling something or drawing an arrow to connect two ideas. By early afternoon, we had the skeleton of a plan. I'd focus on what Blackwell already did well, personal service and relationship-based selling, but modernize it with technology that made ordering easier and delivery faster. I'd target the mid-sized contractors that Hart Industrial ignored because they weren't big enough to be worth my father's time. I'd build a reputation for reliability and transparency, two things my father had spent years eroding with his cutthroat tactics. The financials were harder. Even with optimistic projections, I'd need at least $1.5 million in financing to make the acquisition and have enough working capital to operate while I restructured. That assumed Warren would carry a note for the rest. That assumed the company was actually worth what the article suggested. That assumed a lot of things that might not be true. Iris capped her pen and looked at me. This is doable, but it's going to take time. You need to approach Warren, get access to his books, negotiate terms, secure financing, and close the deal. That's months of work, minimum. Can you survive that long? I thought about the $4,000 in my checking account, the $18,000 in savings, the motel room that cost $450 a week. I can survive 6 months if I'm careful. Then here's what you do next, she said. You reach out to Warren Blackwell and request a meeting. Don't tell him you want to buy his company yet. Tell him you're interested in learning about his business philosophy, that you admire what he's built, that you're exploring opportunities in the industry. Feel him out. See if he's someone you can work with. If that goes well, then you come back to me and we draft a letter of intent. I nodded, already composing the email in my head. And Vanessa, she added, her voice softer. You're going to need a place to live that isn't a weekly motel. You can't build a business from a room on Colfax. You need an address that looks legitimate, a workspace that's professional. Do you have friends you can stay with? I thought about my small circle of acquaintances, most of whom were connected to Hart Industrial or my family in some way. I thought about how quickly word would spread if I showed up on someone's couch, how my father would hear about it, how he'd use it as evidence that I was exactly as incompetent as he'd always claimed. "No," I said. "But I'll figure something out." Iris pulled out her phone and typed something quickly. "I have a friend who manages a co-working space in Rhino. They have small office rentals, month to month. Not cheap, but not outrageous. He owes me a favor. I'll see if he can work something out." She didn't wait for me to thank her. She just gathered her things, slid the legal pad across the table to me, and stood. "Send me that email to Warren before you hit send. I want to make sure the tone is right. And Vanessa," she paused, one hand on her portfolio. "Your father was wrong about you. But you're going to have to prove it to yourself before you can prove it to anyone else." After she left, I sat there alone with my lukewarm coffee and pages of notes. The coffee shop had emptied out, the morning rush replaced by the afternoon lull. A college student in the corner typed furiously on a laptop covered in stickers. Two women near the window talked in low voices about someone's upcoming wedding. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unburdened by the need to prove anything to anyone. I opened my email and started drafting. "Dear Mr. Blackwell, my name is Vanessa Hart. I've worked in the industrial supply sector for the past 6 years, most recently in operations management. I've long admired Blackwell Distribution's reputation for customer service and ethical business practices. I understand you're considering the future of your company, and I'd welcome the opportunity to meet with you to discuss your vision and learn more about what you've built. I believe the industry needs more businesses that prioritize relationships over transactions, and I'd be honored to hear your perspective." I read it 3 times, then sent it to Iris. She responded within 20 minutes. "Good. Professional without being desperate. Flattering without being obsequious. Send it." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I opened a new tab and started searching for apartments. Most of what I found was far outside my budget. Studios in decent neighborhoods started at $1,200 a month. One-bedrooms were $1,500 and up. I expanded my search to include basement apartments, rooms for rent, anything that would give me a legitimate address and a place to sleep that didn't smell like decades of cigarette smoke. I found a listing in the Highlands neighborhood. A basement studio in an older house, $500 a month plus utilities, shared laundry, street parking. The photos showed a small space with concrete floors painted gray, a kitchenette with a hot plate and mini fridge, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it had a window that let in natural light, and the landlord's description emphasized quiet and clean. I called the number listed. A woman answered, voice friendly but efficient. "Yeah, it's still available. You can come look at it today if you want. I'm home until 6. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The house was on a tree-lined street where the homes were a mix of renovated Victorians and older bungalows that hadn't been touched in decades. The landlord, a woman named Ruth who looked to be in her 60s, met me at the side entrance that led to the basement. She had paint-stained hands and wore overalls, and when I commented on it, she explained she was a ceramicist who used the garage as a studio. The apartment was exactly as advertised. Small, sparse, clean. The ceilings were low enough that I could touch them if I reached up. The concrete floor was cold under my feet. But the window faced the backyard where an old cottonwood tree filtered the afternoon light, and when Ruth showed me how the hot plate worked and where the circuit breaker was, I felt something loosen in my chest. "I'll take it," I said. "Don't you want to think about it?" "I've already thought about it." Ruth studied me with the kind of look that said she'd seen plenty of people running from something. "First and last month, plus a $200 deposit. I don't do credit checks, but I also don't tolerate late payments or drama. You keep the place clean, you pay on time, we'll get along fine." I pulled out my debit card. "Can I move in today?" She blinked. "Sure, I guess. Let me get you the keys." An hour later, I stood in my new apartment with my tote bag and the few items I'd taken from the motel room. I'd returned the key to the budget inn and gotten back a partial refund that the purple-haired woman had counted out in small bills without comment. Now I had a space that was mine, at least for as long as I could afford it. I bought a cheap air mattress from the Target on Broadway, along with sheets, a pillow, a lamp, and a set of dishes. I bought groceries, basic things like bread and peanut butter and apples and instant coffee. I set up my laptop on the floor and used a cardboard box as a makeshift desk. That night, I lay on the air mattress and listened to the sounds of the house above me. Footsteps. Running water. The faint sound of music or television. It was better than the motel. It was a start. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I grabbed it off the floor and opened my inbox. The subject line read, Meeting request. Ms. Hart, I appreciate your note. I'm always happy to talk with people who understand that business is about more than just profit margins. I'm available this Friday at 10 if you'd like to come by the warehouse. Fair warning, I'm a straight shooter. If you're wasting my time, I'll tell you. Warren Blackwell. I read the email 3 times, my heart pounding in a way that felt like fear and excitement mixed together until I couldn't tell them apart. I had 4 days to prepare. 4 days to turn my scattered thoughts and ambitious plans into something coherent enough to impress a man who'd built a business from nothing and maintained his integrity in an industry that didn't always reward it. I spent the next 3 days living on instant coffee and granola bars and obsessive research. I pulled up every piece of public information I could find on Blackwell Distribution. Their vendor relationships, their client testimonials, their delivery zones, their pricing structure. I mapped out their competition, including Hart Industrial, analyzing market share and identifying gaps. I created spreadsheets projecting what the company could do with updated technology and strategic marketing. I called vendors I'd worked with at Hart Industrial, people who'd always been friendly, and asked careful questions about their experience with Blackwell. The responses were consistent. Warren was fair, maybe too fair. He left money on the table to maintain relationships. His prices were competitive but not aggressive. His delivery was reliable but not fast. He was respected, but his company hadn't grown in 5 years because he was too comfortable with how things had always been done. That was the opportunity. Not to destroy what he'd built, but to evolve it. Thursday night, I laid out my one professional outfit on the air mattress. Black pants that were slightly wrinkled. A gray blouse that was clean but showed its age. A blazer I'd bought for college interviews that still fit but barely. I looked at these clothes and thought about my father's custom suits, Brandon's expensive watch collection, the way they walked into rooms and expected to be taken seriously because they'd never been given a reason to doubt themselves. I didn't have that luxury. I'd have to earn it. Friday morning, I woke up before dawn and made instant coffee that tasted like regret but gave me the caffeine I needed. I showered in the tiny bathroom, dried my hair as best I could without a proper dryer, and dressed carefully. I looked at myself in the small mirror above the sink and practiced my opening lines. Mr. Blackwell, thank you for taking the time to meet with me. I know your time is valuable. Too stiff. Warren, I appreciate you seeing me. I've been following your company's work for years. Too casual. I settled on something in between and hoped my nerves wouldn't destroy it. Blackwell Distribution was located in a warehouse district north of downtown, the kind of area that was slowly being converted from industrial use to trendy lofts and breweries but hadn't quite made the full transition yet. The building was a low-slung concrete structure with a small office attached to the front. A few trucks were parked in the loading area, men in coveralls moving pallets with forklifts. It looked exactly like what it was, a functional business run by someone who cared more about getting the work done than impressing anyone. I parked in the small lot marked for visitors and sat in my car for a moment, breathing slowly, reminding myself that I belonged here as much as anyone. Then I grabbed my portfolio, the one Iris had insisted I buy, and walked to the front entrance. The office was small and cluttered in the way working offices are. Desks covered in paperwork, filing cabinets that looked decades old, a coffee maker that was currently brewing something that smelled burnt and strong. A woman at the front desk looked up when I entered. She was older, maybe mid-50s, and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck. "You must be Vanessa," she said. "Warren's expecting you. He's in the back office." Go through that door and all the way to the end. I walked through the door she indicated and found myself in a hallway that ran along the side of the warehouse. Through the windows, I could see the main storage area, rows of shelving stacked high with inventory, more forklifts moving back and forth. It was organized chaos, efficient in its own way, but I could already see a dozen places where better systems would improve flow. The office at the end of the hall had a nameplate that read Warren Blackwell, owner. The door was open. I knocked on the frame. A man looked up from behind a desk that was somehow even more cluttered than the ones in the front office. He was probably in his early 70s, with white hair and a weathered face that suggested he'd spent plenty of time in the sun. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, and when he stood to shake my hand, his grip was firm but not aggressive. "Vanessa Hart," he said. "Related to Gerald Hart over at Hart Industrial?" "His daughter," I said, meeting his eyes. "But I don't work there anymore." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "That so? What happened?" I sat down, setting my portfolio on my lap. He told me I'd never understand business. I decided to prove him wrong. Warren leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "That's either brave or stupid." "Maybe both." "Probably both," I admitted. "But I'd rather fail trying than spend the rest of my life being told I'm not good enough." Something shifted in his face. He nodded slowly. "All right then. Tell me why you're here." I took a breath and told him everything. I told Warren Blackwell about working at Hart Industrial for 6 years, about implementing systems that saved money and improved efficiency only to watch my father and brother take credit. I told him about the quarterly report that ended up scattered on an expensive rug, about being told I should look for work in human resources or the school district because I didn't have the instincts for real business. I told him about walking out with nothing but a tote bag and $22,000 to my name. Then I told him what I saw when I looked at his company. Not the weaknesses, not yet. First, the strengths. A reputation built over decades for keeping promises. Vendor relationships based on mutual respect rather than squeezing every penny. Customers who stayed loyal because they knew they'd be treated fairly. A company culture where employees showed up not just for a paycheck but because they believed in what they were doing. Warren listened without interrupting, his weathered hands folded on the desk in front of him. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You've done your homework. I believe in understanding what I'm getting into. So what do you see that needs fixing?" Because I know there's plenty. I'm not blind to the fact that my competitors are eating my lunch on delivery times and online ordering. I just don't know if I have the energy left to modernize, and I'm damn sure not going to sell to some corporate vulture who'll strip this place for parts and lay off everyone who's been with me for 20 years. I opened my portfolio and pulled out the analysis I'd been working on for 3 days. I'd printed it on decent paper, bound it simply, made it look professional without being flashy. I slid it across the desk. "Your delivery routes are inefficient," I said. "You're using the same zones you established 15 years ago, but the city's grown and traffic patterns have changed." I mapped out a new routing system that would cut average delivery time by 30% and reduce fuel costs by at least 20%. "Your inventory management is paper-based, which means you're constantly running into stock issues that could be avoided with a real-time tracking system. "Your ordering process requires customers to call during business hours, which loses you sales to competitors who have online platforms. "And your marketing is non-existent. You're relying entirely on word of mouth and existing relationships, which is admirable but not scalable." Warren picked up the document and started flipping through it. His expression didn't change, but I saw his eyes moving quickly over the pages, pausing on the charts I'd created, the cost-benefit analyses, the projected revenue increases. "This is detailed work," he said finally. "This took more than a few days." "I've been studying this industry for 6 years," I said. "I know every vendor, every competitor, every weak point in the supply chain. I know what customers complain about and what they're willing to pay premium prices for. I know this business, Warren. Maybe better than my father ever did, because I actually listened to what people needed instead of just telling them what they should want." He set the document down and leaned back in his chair again, studying me with those sharp eyes that had probably seen every kind of pitch and promise over 40 years in business. Why should I believe you're any different from your father? He's got a reputation in this industry, and it's not a good one. How do I know you didn't learn all the wrong lessons from him? Because I spent 6 years watching him burn bridges and alienate people, and I spent every one of those years fixing the damage he caused, I said. Because I know what it costs when you treat vendors like enemies and customers like walking wallets. Because my uncle Vincent, who was your friend before my father drove him out of their partnership, taught me that business is about building something that lasts, not just extracting value until there's nothing left. At the mention of Vincent's name, something shifted in Warren's face. He sat forward, his hands flat on the desk. You knew Vince? He was my godfather, I said quietly. He sent me birthday cards every year until he died. The last one told me not to let my father convince me that cruelty was the same thing as strength. He said I had better instincts. Warren was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. Softer. Vince was a good man, he said finally. Best partner your father ever had, and he was too stupid to see it. We stayed in touch after he moved to Seattle. He talked about you sometimes. Worried about you being stuck in that company with Gerald's poison in your ear. He believed I could do more than my father ever gave me credit for. He was right to believe that. Warren picked up the document again, flipped to a page near the middle where I'd outlined the technology implementations. This software you're recommending, we'd need someone who knows how to use it. I can barely work email. I'd handle the implementation and training, I said. It's a learning curve, but not a steep one. Most of your employees are already using smartphones for personal stuff. The systems I'm proposing are designed to be intuitive. And I'd be hands-on through the transition. Warren looked at me over the top of the document. You keep saying you'd do this, you'd handle that. Are we talking about you consulting for me, or are we talking about something else? My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I want to buy your company, Warren. I want to maintain everything you've built while bringing it into the modern market. I want to prove that you can run a successful business without compromising your values. And yes, I want to show my father that he was wrong about me in every possible way. He set the document down carefully, aligning it with the edge of his desk. You've got $22,000 and no job. That's not even a down payment on the furniture in this office, let alone the inventory and equipment. I know. That's why I'm hoping you'll consider seller financing for a significant portion of the purchase price. I'll need to secure outside financing for the rest, which I'm working on. But Warren, I'm not asking you to give me anything. I'm asking you to invest in someone who will treat your legacy with the respect it deserves. Someone who will keep your people employed and your reputation intact. Someone who sees this company as something worth building on, not just stripping down. He was quiet for so long I thought I'd overplayed my hand. I thought about all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons he should laugh me out of his office and tell me to come back when I had real capital and a track record that didn't involve getting fired by my own father. Instead, he stood up and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a folder, thick with papers, and dropped it on the desk in front of me. My financials for the last 5 years. Revenue, expenses, profit margins, everything. You take this home, you go through it with whatever lawyer or accountant you've got helping you, and you tell me if you still think this company is worth buying. Because I'll be honest with you, Vanessa. I'm not making the money I used to. My margins are thin. I've got equipment that needs replacing and a building that needs a new roof. This isn't some gold mine. It's a decent business that could be great in the right hands, but it's going to take work and money and time. I took the folder, feeling the weight of it. When should I get back to you? End of next week. That gives you time to do your due diligence. And Vanessa, he added as I stood to leave, if you're serious about this, you need to understand that your father is going to come after you. He's not going to sit back and watch you compete with him. He's going to make this personal, and he's got resources you don't have. Good, I said again. Let him try. Warren smiled then, just a little. You've got Vince's stubbornness. That's either going to save you or destroy you. I guess we'll find out. I walked out of that office with the folder under my arm and a feeling in my chest that might have been terror or determination or some combination of both. The warehouse workers were on lunch break, sitting on the loading dock with their packed lunches, talking and laughing. A few of them nodded at me as I passed. They had no idea I might be their future boss. They had no idea their entire lives might be about to change because a woman with no money and too much ambition had decided to prove a point to a man who would never acknowledge he was wrong. I drove back to my basement apartment and spread Warren's financials across the concrete floor. For the next 6 hours, I went through every page. Revenue by quarter. Major expenses. Equipment purchases. Payroll. Vendor contracts. Lease agreements. Insurance costs. The company did $12 million in annual revenue, but after expenses, Warren was taking home maybe $300,000 a year. Decent, but not extraordinary. The profit margins were exactly what I'd expected, thin because he prioritized service over efficiency, relationships over ruthless negotiation. But I could see the potential buried in those numbers. With better inventory management, he'd reduce carrying costs. With optimized delivery routes, he'd save on fuel and labor. With an online ordering system, he'd capture sales that currently went to competitors simply because customers wanted convenience. With targeted marketing to mid-sized contractors, he'd expand his customer base without competing directly for the massive accounts that required huge capital investments in inventory. I built a spreadsheet projecting revenue and expenses over 3 years under my management. Conservative estimates, nothing wildly optimistic, just steady growth based on documented improvements from similar companies that had modernized. By year 3, I could have the company doing $18 million in revenue with profit margins nearly double what Warren was currently seeing. I sent everything to Iris along with a message. Is this realistic or am I delusional? She called me 20 minutes later. It's aggressive, but not impossible. You're assuming everything goes according to plan, which it never does. But the fundamentals are sound. If Warren's willing to carry a note and you can find investors for the rest, this could work. How do I find investors? That's the hard part. You need people who believe in you personally, because you don't have a track record. You need people who understand the industry well enough to see the opportunity. And you need people who are comfortable with risk, because this is absolutely a risk. I thought about my savings, dwindling fast between rent and food and the daily coffee shop sessions where I worked. I thought about the 4 months I'd estimated I could survive. It had already been 3 weeks. Time was burning faster than I'd expected. What if I can't find investors? I asked. Then you bootstrap it yourself, Iris said. You find a way to make the deal work with less capital up front. You propose a lower purchase price or a longer timeline. You get creative. Or you walk away and find another opportunity. I'm not walking away. Then get creative. I spent the weekend drafting a proposal for Warren. Purchase price of $3.2 million based on his financials and industry comparables. $1.2 million from seller financing, paid over 10 years at a reasonable interest rate. $2 million from a combination of small business loans and private investors, which I didn't have yet but would find somehow. A detailed 3-year business plan showing how I'd grow revenue and maintain his company culture. A commitment to retain all current employees and honor existing vendor relationships. I printed it on Monday morning at the library and delivered it to Warren's office in person that afternoon. He took it without comment and told me he'd review it and get back to me by Friday. Those 4 days felt longer than the previous 3 weeks combined. I filled the time applying for every small business loan program I could find, knowing most would reject me but needing to try anyway. I reached out to former colleagues from business school, carefully feeling out whether any of them had access to investment capital. I drafted and redrafted my pitch until I could deliver it in my sleep. On Wednesday, my mother called. I stared at her name on my phone screen for 3 rings before I answered. Vanessa, she said, and her voice had that careful neutrality she used when she was trying not to take sides, which meant she'd already taken my father's side and was trying to hide it. Your father told me what happened. I wish you'd talk to us before making such a rash decision. He didn't give me a decision to make, I said. He made it clear there was no future for me at Hart Industrial. I'm just respecting his wishes. He's worried about you. We both are. You walked away from a stable job, and now we're hearing rumors that you're trying to start something with Warren Blackwell. Vanessa, that man is your father's competitor. This looks vindictive. It's not vindictive. It's practical. I know the industry, I have ideas for improvement, and Warren has a company that needs someone to carry it forward. This is a business decision. Your father doesn't see it that way. Then he's seeing it wrong, I said. Tell him I'm doing exactly what he told me to do. I'm finding my own way. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the television in the background, the same news channel my parents watched every evening. Vanessa, whatever you're planning, please think carefully. Your father has worked hard to build his reputation in this city. If you do something to damage that, it's going to hurt the whole family. The whole family, I repeated. Was I included in that when he told me I'd never understand business? Was I part of the family when Brandon took credit for my work? Was I considered family when you stood there and agreed that I'd ruined your lives? She didn't answer that. I have to go, I said, and ended the call before she could say anything else that would make me angry enough to say something I couldn't take back. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, the first real hint that winter was coming to Denver. I dressed in my wrinkled professional clothes and drove to Blackwell Distribution, my hands tight on the steering wheel. I'd gone through every possible scenario in my head. Warren accepting my offer. Warren rejecting it outright. Warren countering with terms I couldn't meet. Warren telling me I was in over my head and to come back when I had real experience. The receptionist smiled when I walked in. He's waiting for you. Same office. I walked down that hallway again, past the windows overlooking the warehouse floor, past the break room where someone had made fresh coffee that smelled significantly better than the instant powder I'd been surviving on. Warren's door was open. He was standing at his filing cabinet, and when he turned around, he had another folder in his hands. Sit down, he said. I sat. My heart was doing that thing where it felt too big for my chest. He put the folder on the desk and sat across from me. I've spent the last 4 days talking to people about you. Vendors we both work with. A couple of your father's former employees who left because they couldn't stand working for him anymore. Even called an old buddy of mine at the Chamber of Commerce who remembered you from some young professionals event. I waited, not sure if this was good or bad. Everyone said the same thing, Warren continued. You're smart. You're thorough. You actually listen when people talk instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. You fixed problems at Hart Industrial that your father and brother created, and you did it without needing credit or recognition. You've got a reputation for being someone who keeps her word. That folder he'd set down contained a single document. He slid it across the desk to me. I'm accepting your offer with 2 modifications, he said. First, I want you to keep my operations manager, Dante Rodriguez. He's been with me for 12 years, and he knows every inch of this business. He's not flashy, but he's solid. You're going to need someone like that when things get complicated. Done, I said. Second, I'm reducing the seller financing to $1 million and extending the term to 15 years. That gives you more room to secure the outside capital you need and take some pressure off your cash flow in the early years. But Vanessa, understand this. If you default, if you run this company into the ground, if you turn it into something that destroys what I spent 4 decades building, I'm taking it back and you're going to owe me everything. This isn't just a business transaction. This is me trusting you with something I care about more than money. I looked at the document, at Warren's signature already on the last page, at the blank line where mine would go. My hands were shaking when I picked up the pen he offered. I signed my name slowly, carefully, making sure every letter was clear. We shook hands across the desk, and his grip was firm and steady. Congratulations, he said. You just bought yourself a company and a whole lot of trouble. I know, I said. Thank you for believing I can handle it. I don't know if you can. But Vince believed in you, and I trusted his judgment more than just about anyone's. So I'm going to trust it one more time. I walked out of that office with the signed purchase agreement in my portfolio and tears in my eyes that I didn't let fall until I was back in my car. I sat in the parking lot of Blackwell Distribution, soon to be mine, and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd just committed to. $2 million I didn't have. A company full of people depending on me not to fail. A father who would see this as a declaration of war. A timeline that would require everything going exactly right just to break even. I called Iris. It's done. Warren accepted. She let out a breath. Okay. Now the real work starts. You've got 60 days to close. That means you need to secure $2 million in financing in the next 8 weeks. I'll start drafting the loan applications tonight. You need to start pitching investors tomorrow. I have no idea how to pitch investors. You'd better learn fast, she said. Because Vanessa, you just bet everything you have and everything you'll ever have on this working out. There's no safety net now. There's no backup plan. You make this work or you lose everything. I know. Good. Then let's get to work. I drove back to my basement apartment and sat on my air mattress with my laptop, staring at a blank document where I was supposed to write a pitch that would convince wealthy strangers to invest in someone with no track record and a family name that was about as appealing as a lawsuit. The concrete floor was cold. The space heater I'd bought at a thrift store rattled in the corner. Outside, I could hear traffic and the sound of Ruth working in her garage studio, probably throwing clay on a wheel, creating something beautiful out of formless material. I started typing. Not the pitch yet, just thoughts. Reasons why this would work. Reasons why it had to work. Reasons why I was the person to do this even though everyone, including some part of myself, thought I was insane. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it, expecting spam. Instead, it read, "Heard you bought Blackwell." That was either brilliant or the dumbest thing you've ever done. Either way, Dad's losing his mind. Thought you'd want to know. Brandon. I stared at the message for a long time. My brother, who'd taken credit for my work, who'd smirked when our father dismissed me, who'd been handed everything I'd had to fight for, was texting me like we were conspirators. Like this was amusing rather than devastating. Like my burning down my relationship with our family for the chance to prove myself was entertainment for him. I deleted the message without responding. Then I went back to my laptop and started writing the pitch that would either save me or destroy me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't doing it for my father's approval or my family's acceptance or anyone's validation except my own. I was doing it because I believed I could. And that, it turned out, was reason enough. The first investor meeting was a disaster. I sat across from a middle-aged venture capitalist named Gordon Shen in his glass-walled office downtown, walking him through my projections and growth strategy while he scrolled through his phone. Halfway through my explanation of the supply chain optimization, he held up a hand. "This is a lifestyle business at best," he said. "Industrial supply distribution has razor-thin margins and requires massive capital investment for minimal returns. You're asking me to put money into a sector that's being eaten alive by online retailers and national chains. Plus, and I'm going to be honest here, you have zero track record. You've never run a company. You've never closed a major deal. You worked for your father, got fired, and now you want me to bankroll your revenge fantasy. That's a hard pass." The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. I thanked him for his time and left, walking 12 blocks back to my apartment because I couldn't afford parking and needed to save every dollar. My professional shoes gave me blisters. The second meeting went better but ended the same. A woman named Patricia Morse who ran a family investment fund listened carefully, asked good questions, and then said she'd need to see at least 2 years of me successfully running the company before she'd consider investing. I explained I needed the investment to buy the company in the first place. She smiled sympathetically and said that was my problem to solve, not hers. The third, fourth, and fifth meetings followed similar patterns. Too risky. No track record. Wrong sector. Come back when you have traction. By the end of the second week, I'd burned through 17 investor meetings and had exactly 0 commitments. My savings account was down to $14,000. I had 6 weeks left to close the deal. Iris and I met at Grounds Coffee on a Tuesday afternoon. She arrived with a stack of loan rejection letters, setting them on the table between us like evidence of a crime. 3 banks, 2 credit unions, and 4 small business loan programs. All rejected. They're all saying the same thing, she said. Insufficient collateral, limited operating history, high debt-to-income ratio. The SBA might have worked if you'd been running the company for at least a year, but as an acquisition loan for a first-time business owner, they won't touch it. I stirred my coffee, watching the cream swirl without really seeing it. So what are my options? We get creative, Iris said. There are private lending groups that specialize in high-risk business acquisitions. The interest rates are brutal, but they'll lend based on the business assets rather than your personal credit. I'm talking 15, maybe 18% interest, but it's capital. I did the math in my head. At 18% interest on $2 million, I'd be paying $360,000 per year just in interest before touching the principal. That would eat most of the company's profit margin. I'd be working just to pay the loan while trying to grow the business. It was barely sustainable, and one bad quarter would put me underwater. What's the alternative? You find a partner, Iris said. Someone with capital who wants in on the deal. They take an equity stake, you maintain control but share the profits. Or you go back to Warren and renegotiate. Ask him to carry more of the note or extend the timeline for securing outside funding. I can't ask Warren for more. He's already trusting me with his life's work. And I'm not bringing in a partner. I didn't walk away from my father's company just to answer to someone else. Then you're looking at private lending or walking away from the deal, Iris said flatly. Those are your options, Vanessa. I know they're not good options, but they're what we have. I left that meeting feeling the walls closing in. 6 weeks to closing. $14,000 in the bank. No investors, no loans, no clear path forward. I walked through Cap Hill as the afternoon faded into evening, past restaurants I couldn't afford to eat in and boutiques selling clothes I'd never be able to buy. I walked until my feet hurt and the sky turned that particular shade of purple that only happens in Colorado, the mountains' dark silhouettes against the fading light. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Vanessa Hart? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes. My name is Colleen Brennan. I own a commercial real estate portfolio here in Denver, and I heard through the business community that you're acquiring Blackwell Distribution. I was wondering if you had time to meet. I stopped walking, my heart suddenly loud in my ears. How did you hear about the acquisition? Warren and I go way back. He called me last week, said he'd found someone special to take over his company but that you were having trouble securing financing. He asked if I might be interested in hearing your pitch. When can we meet? Tomorrow morning, if you're available. My office at 9. I'll be there. She gave me an address in Cherry Creek, one of the wealthier neighborhoods in Denver, and ended the call. I stood on the sidewalk as people flowed around me, commuters heading home, students heading to bars, everyone moving through their lives while mine balanced on the edge of either breakthrough or collapse. I spent that night researching Colleen Brennan. She was in her late 50s, had built a commercial real estate empire starting from a single property she'd renovated herself in her 20s. She'd survived the 2008 crash, come out stronger, and now owned office buildings, retail spaces, and industrial properties across the metro area. She was known for investing in women-owned businesses and for taking chances on people the traditional banking system overlooked. She was also notoriously direct, with a reputation for asking hard questions and accepting nothing less than honest answers. I rewrote my pitch for the 5th time, tailoring it to what I knew about her investment philosophy. I practiced delivering it to my empty apartment until the words felt natural instead of rehearsed. I ironed my interview clothes until the wrinkles were gone and the fabric looked almost professional. I set 3 alarms because I couldn't afford to oversleep. Colleen's office was in a renovated building that still had exposed brick and original hardwood floors but with modern updates that made it clear this was serious business. The receptionist offered me coffee in a real mug, not a paper cup, and led me to a conference room with windows overlooking a small courtyard garden. Colleen arrived exactly at 9. She was tall, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that made her eyes look even more intense. She wore a navy suit and carried a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my rent. We shook hands and she gestured for me to sit at the conference table. "Warren speaks highly of you," she said, settling into her chair across from me. "He told me you remind him of his old partner, Vincent Hart." I knew Vince. Good man. Terrible taste in business partners, but a good man. My father wasn't always easy to work with. "That's diplomatic," Colleen said. "I've known Gerald for 30 years. He's brilliant at sales and terrible at everything else. Treats people like assets to be leveraged instead of humans to be respected. Vincent was the heart of that company, and when Gerald drove him out, Hart Industrial started dying. It's just been a slow death that no one wanted to acknowledge." She pulled out a tablet and opened a file. "I've reviewed the financials you sent over. Warren's company is solid but stagnant. You've identified the right areas for improvement. Your projections are aggressive but not unrealistic. What I want to know is why you. Why should I invest in someone with no management experience and a last name that's associated with some of the worst business practices in this industry?" I met her eyes and didn't flinch. Because I spent 6 years watching my father destroy relationships and alienate customers, and I learned exactly what not to do. Because I implemented every system I'm proposing for Blackwell at Hart Industrial, and they worked until my father dismantled them because they weren't his ideas. Because I understand this industry from the ground up, not from a corner office but from actually doing the work. And because I'm not doing this to get rich or prove something to my family. I'm doing this because Warren built something worth preserving, and I'm the person who can take it into the next generation without destroying what made it valuable in the first place. Colleen was quiet for a moment, studying me. "What happens when your father comes after you?" "Because he will. He's going to see this as betrayal, and he's going to make it personal." "Let him," I said. "I'm not competing with my father. I'm building a better company than he ever could, and if that threatens him, that's his problem. What's your contingency plan if this fails? If the modernization doesn't work, if customers don't respond, if you run out of capital?" "Then I lose everything," I said. "My savings, my reputation, probably any chance of working in this industry again. But I don't have a backup plan because I'm not planning to fail." She smiled at that, just slightly. "Good. People with backup plans are hedging their bets. I don't invest in hedged bets." She turned her tablet toward me. "I'm prepared to invest $1.5 million in exchange for a 25% equity stake. You maintain majority control and full operational authority. I get quarterly reports and a seat on your advisory board, which you're going to need to form anyway. My money comes with my network, which includes every major contractor and developer in Denver. You'll have access to introductions that would take you years to build on your own." The number hit me like a physical thing. 1.5 million. More than enough to close the deal with the private lending group covering the remaining 500,000 at rates I could actually manage. More than enough to have working capital for the first year. More than enough to mean this was really happening. 25%, I said slowly. "That's a significant stake." "It's fair for the risk I'm taking," Colleen said. "You're unproven, the sector is challenging, and your family situation creates complications. But I believe in the fundamentals of what you're building, and I believe Warren wouldn't have chosen you if he didn't see something special. So 25%, with a standard vesting schedule and buyback options if you want to regain full ownership down the line. Take it or leave it." I looked at the terms on her tablet. They were fair, more than fair actually. This was the lifeline I needed. This was the difference between the deal closing and walking away with nothing. "I need one modification," I said. 20% equity stake instead of 25. I'll give you the board seat and quarterly reports and full access to my network strategy, but I want to keep more operational flexibility. Colleen leaned back, considering. 22%. And I want monthly reports for the first year, not quarterly. I need to see that you can actually execute on these plans. I extended my hand across the table. Deal. We shook on it, and just like that, I had the capital I needed. We spent the next 2 hours going through the terms in detail, Iris joining us by video call to review the legal language. By early afternoon, we had a letter of intent drafted. Colleen's lawyer would formalize it over the next week, but the commitment was real. Walking out of that building, I felt lighter than I had in months. The autumn air was crisp and clean, and for the first time, I let myself believe this might actually work. I called Iris immediately. We're closing, I told her. Colleen Brennan is in for 1.5 at 22% equity. I can get private lending for the rest. She let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a cry of relief. You did it. I genuinely wasn't sure you could pull this off, but you did it. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have navigated the legal maze without you. Send me the letter of intent. I'll start on the closing documents. Vanessa, she paused. Your father's going to find out. Probably soon. Are you ready for that? I'll have to be. The news broke 3 days later. Not through official channels, but through the industry gossip network that moved faster than any press release. Someone at the county clerk's office where we'd filed preliminary paperwork mentioned it to someone who mentioned it to someone else, and by Thursday afternoon, my phone was ringing. My father's name on the screen. I stared at it for 3 rings, then answered. What the hell do you think you're doing? His voice came through, loud and sharp. I just heard from Keith that you're buying Blackwell Distribution. Tell me that's not true. It's true. The deal closes in 3 weeks. Silence. Then, in a voice so cold it could frost glass, you did this to hurt me. I did this because Warren offered me an opportunity and I was qualified to take it. This has nothing to do with you. Everything you do has to do with me. I'm your father. That company has been my competition for 40 years, and you just handed them everything you learned working for me. Every vendor relationship, every customer insight, every operational detail. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've given myself a future that doesn't depend on your approval, I said. That's what I've done. You're going to fail, he said. You're going to run that company into the ground in 6 months, and everyone in this industry is going to know it was because you didn't have what it takes. And when you do fail, don't come crawling back to me for help. I wouldn't dream of it, I said, and ended the call. My hands were shaking. I sat on my air mattress in my basement apartment and felt the full weight of what I'd just done. I'd burned the bridge completely. There was no going back now, no possibility of reconciliation, no chance that my father would ever see me as anything other than a traitor. But I also felt something else. Freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn his respect or prove myself worthy of his approval. I was just moving forward on a path I'd chosen, and whether I succeeded or failed, it would be on my own terms. The closing process took exactly 3 weeks. Iris worked with Warren's attorney to finalize the purchase agreement. Colleen's investment came through along with the private lending for the remaining balance. I signed so many documents my hand cramped. Warren signed his portion at his warehouse, surrounded by the employees who'd become mine. On a cold Monday morning in November, I walked into the county office and filed the final paperwork that made Blackwell Distribution officially mine. Warren met me for lunch that afternoon at a diner near the warehouse. He looked tired but relieved, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy load for a long time and finally got to set it down. How does it feel? He asked. Terrifying, I admitted. Exhilarating. Probably a mistake. He laughed. That's exactly how it should feel. If you weren't scared, I'd know you didn't understand what you were taking on. He slid an envelope across the table. That's the keys to the office, the warehouse, and the backup storage facility. Also the passwords to everything and the contact list for all our vendors. Dante's expecting you tomorrow morning at 7. He'll walk you through the daily operations. I took the envelope, feeling the weight of those keys. Thank you for trusting me with this. Don't thank me yet, Warren said. Thank me in 5 years if the company's still standing and my people still have jobs. That's when I'll know I made the right choice. We finished lunch and said goodbye in the parking lot. He got into his truck, and I watched him drive away, this man who'd bet his legacy on someone with no track record and a famous last name that was now associated with his biggest competitor. I got into my old Honda and drove to the warehouse, my warehouse, and sat in the parking lot looking at the building that was now my responsibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. Dad's hiring a lawyer. Says he's going to find a way to shut you down. Just thought you should know. I deleted the text without responding. Then I got out of my car and walked toward the entrance of Blackwell Distribution, soon to be rebranded, soon to be transformed, soon to be either my greatest achievement or my most spectacular failure. The receptionist looked up when I entered. Oh, Miss Hart. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I know, I said. I just wanted to walk through. Get a feel for the place. She smiled and handed me a visitor badge even though I technically didn't need one anymore. I walked through the warehouse, past rows of inventory and workers operating forklifts, past the break room where someone had made fresh coffee and left donuts on the counter. I walked into Warren's office, my office, and looked at the desk covered in 40 years of accumulated business artifacts. There was a framed photo on the shelf behind the desk. Warren as a younger man, standing next to Uncle Vincent at what looked like an industry conference. Both of them smiling, holding drinks, looking like they believed the world was full of possibility. I picked up the photo and studied Vincent's face, trying to see if he'd known even then how things would turn out, if he'd had any idea that his goddaughter would one day stand in this office trying to build something he would have been proud of. I set the photo back carefully and turned to look out the window at the warehouse floor below. These were my employees now. This was my company. And somewhere across town, my father was plotting my destruction, convinced I'd fail because I'd always been less than Brandon, less than him, less than what a real Hart should be. He was wrong. I was going to prove him wrong in every way that mattered. But first, I had to survive tomorrow morning when I'd meet my new team and try to convince them that the boss's daughter who'd never run anything was somehow qualified to lead them into an uncertain future. First, I had to figure out how to implement all the changes I'd promised while keeping the company profitable. First, I had to learn how to be the leader I'd claimed I could be. I stood in that office as the afternoon light slanted through the windows, and I made myself a promise. I would not fail. Not because failure wasn't an option, but because too many people were counting on me. Warren. Colleen. Iris. The workers on the floor below who had no idea their lives were in the hands of someone who was making this up as she went along. And maybe, somewhere, Uncle Vincent was watching, hoping I had the strength to be the person he'd believed I could become. I had to hope that was enough. The first 6 months were chaos. I implemented the inventory tracking system and half the staff resisted because they'd been doing things the same way for 15 years. I optimized delivery routes and 2 drivers quit because they didn't want to learn new procedures. I launched the online ordering platform and spent 3 weeks troubleshooting technical problems while manually processing orders on my laptop at 2 a.m. Dante Rodriguez became my anchor through all of it. He knew which employees needed gentle coaching and which needed direct orders. He knew which vendors would work with us through payment delays and which demanded cash on delivery. He knew when I was pushing too hard and when I needed to push harder. Without him, I would have drowned in the first month. Revenue dipped initially, exactly as I'd projected. Existing customers were nervous about the ownership change. New customers were skeptical about our capabilities. My father spread rumors through industry channels that I was running the company into bankruptcy, that employees were jumping ship, that Warren had made a terrible mistake trusting someone so inexperienced. Some of it was true. Some of it was exaggeration. All of it made securing new contracts harder than it should have been. But slowly, methodically, things started shifting. The online ordering system attracted smaller contractors who'd been ignored by larger suppliers. The faster delivery times won over customers tired of waiting 3 days for parts they needed immediately. The transparent pricing built trust with buyers exhausted by the negotiation games my father loved to play. Word spread that Blackwell Distribution under new management actually delivered on its promises. By month 8, revenue had recovered to Warren's baseline. By month 10, we'd exceeded it by 12%. By the end of the first year, we were up 23% with profit margins that made Colleen smile during our monthly meetings. The real turning point came 14 months after I'd taken over. Henderson Construction, the largest general contractor in the Denver metro area, put out a request for proposals for their industrial supply needs. It was a 7-figure annual contract, the kind that could transform a mid-sized supplier into a major player. Hart Industrial had held that contract for 8 years. I spent 2 weeks preparing our proposal. I brought Dante in to review our capacity and delivery capabilities. I had Iris examine every clause in the RFP to make sure we could meet the legal requirements. I built a presentation that focused on reliability, transparency, and customer service rather than the lowest possible price. The morning of the presentation, I dressed in a new suit I'd finally been able to afford, drove to Henderson's downtown offices, and walked into a conference room where my father and Brandon were already seated with their presentation materials spread across the table. My father's face when he saw me was worth every sleepless night and every moment of doubt. He went pale, then red, then settled into a cold fury that made his jaw tight. The procurement committee arrived and the presentations began. Brandon went first, smooth and confident, laying out Hart Industrial's history and reliability. He showed pricing that undercut our expected bid by 15%. He emphasized their established relationships and proven track record. Then it was my turn. I didn't try to match their pricing. Instead, I showed data on our delivery times, our order accuracy rates, our customer satisfaction scores. I showed the technology platform that let project managers track orders in real time. I showed testimonials from contractors who'd switched from Hart Industrial and never looked back. I showed them what it looked like when a company actually prioritized their needs over profit maximization. The decision came 3 days later. Henderson Construction awarded the contract to Blackwell Distribution. My father called that evening. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that I deleted without listening to. 2 weeks after that, 3 of Hart Industrial's longtime vendors reached out to me. They'd heard about the Henderson contract. They wanted to discuss shifting their business to a supplier who treated partners with respect rather than viewing them as obstacles to be conquered. 6 months later, Hart Industrial laid off 20% of their workforce. The business community whispered about financial troubles, about losing major accounts, about Gerald Hart's refusal to adapt finally catching up with him. I didn't celebrate. I just kept building. I promoted Dante to COO and gave him equity in the company. I hired 2 of the employees my father had laid off, people who'd been loyal to him for years and got nothing in return. I started a profit-sharing program that turned workers into stakeholders. I built the kind of company Uncle Vincent would have been proud of. Colleen reduced her equity stake to 15%, selling me back 7 points when the company's valuation tripled. Iris joined our board officially and helped me navigate expansion into Colorado Springs and Fort Collins. We rebranded from Blackwell Distribution to Summit Industrial Solutions, honoring Warren's legacy while marking the new direction. I moved out of the basement apartment into a small house in Washington Park. Nothing extravagant, just a place with a real bedroom and a kitchen where I could actually cook. Ruth, my former landlord, came to the housewarming and brought a ceramic bowl she'd made herself. It sits on my mantel still. My mother reached out once, asking if we could have lunch. I agreed, curious more than hopeful. She spent an hour making excuses for my father, explaining how stressed he was, how the business challenges weren't his fault, how families should support each other through difficult times. She never once acknowledged what he'd said to me in that office, never apologized for standing beside him when he dismissed me. I thanked her for lunch and haven't spoken to her since. Brandon sent a LinkedIn request last month. I declined it. My father's company still exists, smaller now, struggling to compete in an industry that's moved past his tactics. I see him occasionally at industry events. We don't speak. He looks older, diminished, like someone who built his identity on being the biggest presence in the room and suddenly found himself irrelevant. I don't feel sorry for him. I don't feel vindicated either. Mostly, I feel free. Summit Industrial Solutions did $19 million in revenue last year. We're projected to hit $25 million this year. We employ 43 people who have health insurance, retirement plans, and a boss who knows their names and asks about their families. We've won awards for customer service and workplace culture. We're profitable, growing, and built on a foundation of treating people like human beings instead of resources to be extracted. Last week, I received a letter from a young woman who'd heard me speak at a Chamber of Commerce event. She'd been working at her family's business, feeling invisible and undervalued, wondering if she was crazy to think she could do better. She wanted advice. She wanted to know if it was worth the risk of walking away. I wrote back and told her what Uncle Vincent told me. Real leaders adapt or disappear. Cruelty isn't the same as strength. You have better instincts than people who've never had to question themselves. Then I included a copy of Warren's note from years ago, the one that said I'd build something nobody could see at the time. I told her she would too, if she was brave enough to bet on herself when everyone else was betting against her. I don't know if my father ever thinks about that day in his office when he told me I'd never understand business. I don't know if he connects his company's decline to the moment he threw away someone who actually knew how to build instead of just extract. But I think about it. Not often, but sometimes. And every time I do, I walk through my warehouse, talk to my employees, review our growing client list, and feel grateful that he was wrong. Being underestimated was the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me the freedom to build something real. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.